So I think we are live now. Hello, hello. My goodness, what platform are we even on? What I've lost my entire mind.
YouTube.
Oh my goodness, YouTube. Thank you. See, and the worst of it is, at first I thought you said YouTube. I was like, what?
Oh no, I lost that ages ago. It's not news for me.
So anyhow. So Matt, how is it going?
It's going okay. I've got a bit of a sickness going on. It's not too bad, but I might be a little less chatty than I normally am.
Well, that's real unfortunate since we are starting solo or duo. It is today, I guess, just you and me for night now.
Yeah, I guess you know what, I'll fight through it.
Yeah,
You go check the chat, see who's if there's anybody on yet.
yeah,
Uh,
excellent.
in the meantime, Shazam is coming out. Have you gotten the chance to see it? Because I know it's some theaters are playing it early.
Oh, I have not had a chance to see it yet. So is it today? Is it opening or is it next week?
It's like some theaters are playing it early, I've heard. I don't know the full story. It could have just been like an early screening event that was across the country.
So yeah, I know. There's a bunch of YouTube reviewers that got to go in early, and that seems fun.
Yeah, I always thought about that, like, especially video game reviewers on YouTube, like they get sent copies from the game companies themselves. Usually there's a bit of even, or I think it is illegal to do this, to like kind of give someone three free things and say, hey, review this, and they would give it a positive review. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I do think it's really cool when these people have made their entire career off of, reviewing different products or bits of media, and then they get invited by the very companies to like special events, or they get sent early copies of movies or games. And usually not movies; it's almost always games. But I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, get those screeners for the reviewers. That's a heck of a thing for sure. But I actually, I know, the thing is, especially with screeners they have for like the Oscars and stuff for members of the Academy and the Emmys and all things like that. They the ones that they give out, the discs and used to be tapes and all that kind of thing. They're technically not there's property of the studios still. And one of the really interesting aspects or avenues of that is when um, is that they have these discs that just kind of float around that technically aren't for sale. They're still property of the studios, and so that's one of the aspects of all of that. But I ended up a few years ago. My father-in-law was cruising around eBay and picked up just a lot of Star Wars stuff, and amongst them was a screener copy of the Clone Wars animated series, the Gandhi Tartakovsky animated Clone Wars, and that was a screener copy that I ended up with.
That's
So
awesome. That little series was really cool. I remember watching it when I was a wee laddie.
yeah, it was pretty freaking epic, that's for sure. So Danielle is in the chat, says hello.
She was telling me at first that the chat was working. See, I told her. She was telling me that the chat was giving her problems, like she wasn't able to use it. I'm not entirely certain. Also, joining us just now is Darakin. If he wants, or if he unmutes himself.
Hey, cool. That sounds like a deal. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Well, that was Matt. That's who that was.
No, this is Darakin.
That's the weirdest bit you've ever done, dude.
I don't know what he even sounds like.
I don't either. We've chatted over the social medias, but never voice to voice. So this is going to be a new experience for me. So, and
At the very least, Is that, did he draw his profile image there? Because I mean, that's pretty cool looking.
I do not know. I do not know. That's one of the many things we can ask for him. If he comes on with us. So
Oh yeah, it could be some technical difficulties.
it could be, or he could have signed on expecting to finish his dinner, and because we scheduled him at 8, so because
Oh yeah, you know, this is throwing things out of whack.
yeah, a little bit. Well, I mean, Pope fired I was gonna be here first hour, but I'm just afraid the time zones may have got confusing. I always try to be real explicit about all of that, but we'll just have to see how all that works, I suppose.
That's why I asked.
Oh, is that him?
Oh yes.
I was way off with my guesstimate.
So Durkin, thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and shift our conversation to you rather than the time fillers we were doing at the moment, since that's where we're at right now. So,
are we live right this second?
We are live right this second. Yes.
Okay.
So
wasn't sure.
No, absolutely.
Let me know.
Oh yeah. So you of course have been working on promoting your Indiegogo campaign for the Veil War. I was eyeballing that yesterday. Could you kind of go ahead and talk to us a little bit about that?
Nope, I can't do that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you were looking at that new alternate cover that I just put up by Joseph White.
Oh no, I didn't see that. When did you put that up?
A few days ago.
Okay. So
it's a sexy goblin there.
I will check that out.
For free.
Taking a peek at your some of the art that you've done or shared at the very least. Are you the writer of your project or are you the artist?
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing. Back when I had money, I went and I wasn't confident in my writing, so I hired a writer and I hired an artist. So I created the idea and then I hired them. That was 10, 15 years ago. I'm editing the work pretty much and possibly rewriting all the dialogue, depending on how if I can like work the numbers to allow it, because I already set up all the numbers for what I can do with all the lettering before I had the notion that I should probably rewrite it. That I would rewrite it, so I have those limitations set in place.
So by numbers, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm at a goal of $3,000, and that's that's incorporating the price for lettering, price for coloring, price for ISBN, and all that stuff.
Right.
So the whatever the price tag for lettering is, if I already had the notion in it would be X amount of pages, and if you add more pages to it in the script, that's more lettering costs.
Right. So with the Veil War, what is the basic premise? What's your elevator pitch for that?
Okay, it's kind of both two ways about this, but basically there's a Warntord village that had an orphan girl. She got her parents were killed, and somewhere in the mess that happened, she found her way into the fairy realm. And there she learned magic, became this mage, and came back to the modern world to make both worlds peaceful.
Okay.
Basic idea of where it starts off.
Okay. So in this, are we talking like a classic Northern European fairy realm then?
Yeah, all the myths and legends that you've heard of in the past, that's pretty much incorporated into this fairy realm. So like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round, that's incorporated into it. Mermaids, Atlanteans. Haven't really delved into the idea of how the gods are represented in this yet. But I assume that if I if I make this long term, then gods would eventually come into play.
So
Now, one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of busty orcs. I'm going to assume they are. Like, orcs or trolls or ogres. You're going to have to explain that one to me, but there's a lot of lewd photos.
Well, there's only one lewd thing in there.
There's like, I think it's like two. You were like, they're either that or like you were just sharing some art. They're both of like troll girls. Either way, no shame. Everyone likes girls. Well, not entirely. And, you know, there's some.
Yeah, the one goblin, the alternate cover, I was like, Joseph was trying to help me, and so he's like, if it gets funded, I'll do this. I was like, like, that sort of has nothing to do with anything, but sure.
Now, when it comes to funding, like, have you made it all the way?
No, I'm at $1,035 right now, which is
impressive.
35% of the way, or 34.5 or something like that.
Now, are you doing a 30-day or a 60-day on that?
It was 60 days. It's down to, I think, 21 days now.
Mm-hmm. So you are getting close to the crunch time.
Yeah, I have about $700 to make for each week.
So
I did hear somebody said that your best bets are with the opening of the campaign and with the final stretch of the campaign. Because, like, in the middle, people will go like, oh, I can get that tomorrow. And then, you know, as it comes to that final week, they're like, oh, crap, I really need to get this.
Well, here's the thing. That's true, but everything about what I'm doing is odd. So, and it carries over to how it seems to be funny, like the backers, because if you look at my like when people are backing, it's pretty much evened out to like one a day or like every few days that I get a new backer. So it's not like a massive spike at the beginning and then a massive spike at the end for me for right now. I'm hoping there's a massive spike, but the trending line right now is pretty much even out. So each day I get a few backers, or like I said, every few days I get a backer or two.
Now, I want to ask you, you said that this started 15 years ago when you were hiring people. When did this begin, and like what inspired you to kind of come back to it? Or were you keeping on it as these 15 years passed?
Basically financial situation.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I had the idea back in like 2003 when I was in college, in an art college, and then I basically off of the what's it, the Slayers anime, which I don't really remember all that much of now. But I got this idea for a game. I was gonna work on it, and then someone convinced me to turn it into a comic idea. And I was like, well, I have money now, so I'm gonna hire some people to do this. And we worked on it for about from 2005 to like 2010 when financial situation changed. And then I hadn't thought about it until I was like, I want to do a comic. But the first route I went to is writing my own scripts and everything now because I'm more confident in my writing. And I'm pretty sure my scripts are pretty good. Everyone that has read them says they're good. Don't have the money for an artist, but I have all this art laying around for like I have like 90 pages of this done. So I was like, let's see if I can go anywhere with this. Screw the consequences of whatever the happens with contracts, whatever. I'm pretty sure I'm safe with that, but I'm not absolutely sure with it. And that has nothing to do with whether I can release it or not. It's just back end deals and all like that, how profits get shared out.
Now, for 15 years, did it ever get demoralizing? Like you felt like it was taking too long, or that you'd never be able to make it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But because of the contractual issues, I haven't really thought about this since like 2011. So I pretty much forgot almost everything about this story. And that's why I'm a little bit like not fully figuring out the story, and then at a later point I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. That's what this is about. I'm sort of exploring and learning about it as I go through the campaign. That's why the campaign also sort of changes. This is like my 6th layout of the campaign page that I'm working on. So,
Now, what were your inspirations for this? Like, I'm kind of getting a Warcraft or World of Warcraft kind of vibe from some of the character designs. What were some of your inspirations?
well, like I said, it was Slayers for the idea. I can't say anything about the character designs because that was all the writers and artists' thing. And someone said that it looks like Warcraft with the goblins and the wings. And I looked at the dates. This would have come out before the date that I saw that. So I don't know what he used for inspiration for that.
That's kind of interesting. I remember actually, this is going to be a bit of one of my famous homemade tangents, but I remember hearing somewhere like there's this old story that went around that the Matrix was actually an idea that was stolen from somebody who was writing it in private. And what I always get them confused with the Russos, the Wachowskis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wachowskis.
Yeah, and then like they came along and actually found this. Like the claim was that they came along and found this person's writings and stole them, and then made a ton of money off of it. And for the longest time, people would tell me it's like, oh yeah, that happened, and they had to pay this lady a ton of money to get her or to make up for it. And apparently, I did some research myself recently and found out that this lady was dismissed as, she didn't even show up to court when they set the date for her.
Wow. That's the first time I heard of that.
Yeah, I've never, like, a lot of my friends have watched The Matrix their whole lives. I've only really watched it within the past couple months.
So
I feel like I kind of missed out because my younger self would have had a lot of fun with it. Like, not too young though, because I think some of the stuff could have scared me.
So you've never seen the Animatrix?
I know it exists, and I know parts. I've seen bits and pieces of it, and they're impressive.
Yeah. I think the Animatrix is far superior to anything else with a name on it.
I don't know. I think I actually did enjoy that first movie quite a bit.
Yeah. No, I should have said aside from the first movie. The first movie is solid. It's very good, but the rest of it just goes entirely off the rails.
Yeah, I was told not to really bother with the follow-ups.
I'm one of the few people that like the follow-ups, so yeah, it's a lot of people I think were looking for a lot of action, and they gave them people a lot of philosophy. That's cool. I like philosophy, so I don't mind it.
I might.
Well, I didn't dislike that there was philosophy. I just didn't feel that it was internally consistent. It was like the entire thing, especially the third, was basically just a big bait and switch, and the premises that were laid out by Agent Smith in the movie were contrary and didn't naturally flow from his premises. It just felt very like each act felt disjointed from the other acts, and it didn't have a clear logistical flow through, I felt.
Well, with regards to Agent Smith, that's anything that he says can't be taken as logical to begin with. He's a algorithm that's gone nutty. So yeah, I don't know what you're exactly referring to of contradictory.
I do have to back off of the conversation just a scotch on there, and here's part of why. I haven't seen them in so long that I remember my impressions, but not entirely what spurred them on. So I'd have to go through and give them another watch through and remember, oh yeah, that was my reason for that.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I've seen them too.
So
but, there's theories that
have to do that.
Yeah, there's theories about it where it goes like if you see near the end of I think it's the third one, like where Neo like flips out in the real world and he's suddenly able to see the like it's a matrix outside of the matrix.
Oh yeah.
Like people theorize that that's actually another construct And so the Matrix is actually a construct within a construct within a construct.
Right.
That sounds. I'm gonna be real. That sounds a bit gimmicky, but I also haven't seen it in context.
Yeah,
I am willing to give it a shot though, because I mean, some of my friends are split on it. Some of them have told me do not bother past the first one. Some of them said, "Oh, that's pish posh. The follow ups are fine."
Yeah.
I mean, that's always been my philosophy. I don't want to. I never saw the follow ups to Smokey and the Bandit, and I love that movie.
That's a very different kind of a thing, though.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of principle of being told by everybody, "Don't watch the follow ups."
So one of the things that I do remember I specifically did not care for in the third one is the third one very heavily leans upon certain principles of Gnosticism that I think are nonsense. And my personal opinion may very well be tainting my opinion of the work as a whole as well. The idea that the creator of a good thing it can't contain the good of that good thing, that kind of an aspect. But yeah, that was like I said, to have a really complex conversation, I would need to go back and rewatch the movies, and I'm not particularly a big fan of it, so I don't know that I want to. But
yeah, the older you get, the more you realize how much of a time commitment movies are. You know, it's 2 hours, unless it's a short film, when, you know, really nobody outside of art school is watching those.
it's okay. You don't want to argue with me about what you think is good or bad about movies, because like I'll go, like just for example, a lot of people are like the fourth Aliens movies is bad. I'm like, that's like the best one of the set. It's like,
I kind of I know that some people are indifferent to Alien 3. That's the one I'm actually the most interested in of the ones I've never seen.
well, and I'm utterly ill-equipped for that conversation because I have only seen Alien Resurrection.
You haven't seen Alien or Aliens?
Nope, I haven't.
Oh man, you're missing out. That's a classic 80s movie, and
Yeah, I'm not against seeing it. It's just one of those things where now that there is no Blockbuster, I don't have internet at my house, right? I'm doing this from a secure location elsewhere. So where I am at with that is I can't even just go down and get it. I have to have it, you know, somebody who has it that's willing to lend it to me on a disc or something, or I'd have to hire it.
yeah. That's what I started doing like a few years ago, is going back and watching these 80s movies and a lot of the other stuff, because I started feeling like I should have seen all this stuff by now, and I just hadn't. So I went out and saw all the Alien stuff. I still need to watch all the Terminator stuff.
Have you at least seen 1 and 2?
What, of Aliens or Terminator?
Terminator.
I've seen bits of them. I don't know how much of them I've seen.
That's something I'd have to recommend a lot. Like, I know that what you're talking about, the feeling of, oh, I really should have seen this by now, but I haven't. Because you get into these conversations with people and it's like, yeah, you know, I haven't seen that. And then immediately they just like stare at you and they're like, oh, you haven't seen this yet? How did you make it this far without seeing it? I'm like, I haven't.
And here's the funny thing is Barry and I will go through that. My one of our artists over here, Barry Ketz, he often will castigate me for not having seen whatever movie from the 80s. And I'm like, you realize I was not allowed to watch our pictures until the 90s, and there's only so many hours in a day, right?
Well, I also have the weird thing of that I've never read any of Shakespeare before.
Oh, really? Now that's a crime right there, man.
It's like every person, like, you're supposed to learn that in high school, and just my high school didn't teach it, so.
Oh, see, that's a crime. That's a crime.
I'm indifferent about Shakespeare. I've never been good. It's like I knew a lot of kids who either pretended to or knew how to read Shakespeare fluently. And I was just the guy that was stuck behind trying to sit there with like a dictionary open for these words that haven't been used in several centuries.
Well, and here's part of it. See, you know, we talk every once and again, we bring up the religion thing here on the Mattriarchy. I grew up in a Baptist tradition a non-denominational church in the Bible Belt, right? So I read the King James, so I was pretty familiar with the language before I was old enough to start understanding Shakespeare. So when we hit Shakespeare in school, anything you don't know, you pick up from the context if you get the basic rules down. So that wasn't a difficult thing for me.
All right, so you got an unfair advantage.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, going back to, because I know this is one of my famous homegrown, homemade tangents, but going back to Diraken, when did you kind of come into crowdfunding? Like, did you see the big crowdfunding boom and you're like, oh, maybe this is my chance to finally get my ideas out there? Or what was your story?
Well, with regards to like crowdfunding a comic, I didn't realize it for some reason that it might be a good idea to try to crowdfund a comic until after I saw what's his name, Richard Meyer, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that can be done, and I don't know why I didn't think of that.
I think one of the most beautiful things about all of this is that everyone can see in this. They're not just in it for finances. They just see a way that they can get their idea out there, right? They can see that, like, they've had these ideas they wanted to do forever, or and they see that there's now a way you can actually do it. Man, make a pretty decent chunk of money, but you can get it out there and like have a stable market made out of it.
Well, for me, like I was saying, it was sort of just like, oh yeah, you can do that. And it's one of those things where it's there, you actually can do it, and you just don't think about it. And I know there's like various things out there that everyone has like experiences with. Like, you take a cigarette, for example, you don't think about the cancer, but it's there. And it takes it takes you actually getting cancer or whatever to make you go, oh, maybe I should stop this.
See, and that's when it comes to that particular subject, that's something that it's always on my mind, because when I was younger, my great aunt, she smoked way too much and it ended up costing her life. So like I can't have that association with cigarettes without ever thinking about cancer.
Well, it's the same thing with like being fat. It's you go and eat stuff, you don't think about
You don't
eating.
think about, yeah, I know that story a little too well, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, what were some of your comic book inspirations? Like, say in the tone of writing and and in terms of art.
um, let's see. My inspirations for like writing and stuff like that is more in line with Heinlein and Pratchett. Uh, they're if you don't know who those are, that's Starship Troopers, the writer of Starship Troopers and the writer of Discworld, and they're like worlds apart from each other. One is like the driest text you can possibly imagine, but he's perfect storyteller. And the other is his language is just magical. He could take the most boring story you have ever heard and just the way he writes, he's such a wordsmith that he can make it interesting.
That series has been on my back burner forever. I've been wanting to look at it so much. It's been in my backlog. I mean, because I've heard it's also really funny, and I know there were a couple of point and click games made out of Discworld in the 90s.
Oh, and also, like if you have to read something, like I think every child should read The Science of Discworld, because what it does is it takes you're in Discworld, and they have it so that the Wizards of the Academy create the Earth in our universe, and then they go and figure out the like physics of the world and like why is that happening, and then they also juxtapose that with actual scientists explaining things and how things work, and that should be like standard read for every kid at like I don't know, you like probably sixth grade level, something like that. It's just a great read. Plus, it teaches you how science actually works, so you don't get brainwashed by this is how it is because this is what a scientist says it is.
Hello, my beautiful friends. I am so sorry that I am late. I was eating and I did not see the Twitter message, so I am so sorry.
It happens. It happens. Don't worry.
But I am here now, and I have comics with me, and I am ready to speak upon my favorite topic, which is, of course, Starfire. So what would you guys like to know tonight about Starfire?
I want to know why people always kind of look at me weird when I say Cyborg's my favorite Titan.
Cyborg's amazing!
And see, it's not like I think a lot of people were just like, he's okay. But like I always really liked him, especially in the cartoon where he was, or I guess you shouldn't say cartoon because of the tone of it was more like it was, it's an animated series.
Oh no, it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon.
Yeah, I mean, that's a simple way of saying it, and that's just the way I'm gonna keep saying it. But he was like the big brother of the group, and I liked that a lot.
Well, okay, the thing that makes Cyborg so appealing is he's just a guy that kind of got messed over by his father, and he's trying to do the right thing. And that's one of the reasons why I like Cyborg, is because even in situations where he could do the wrong thing, like there's one issue where he's pretty much getting recruited by a Black Panther dude, and he's sitting there like, dude, this isn't right. Like, you don't just hate people over their race. You yeah, this bad stuff has happened, but what we need to do is actually fight for equality, not try to get revenge.
So that comic
be the Borg
couldn't be made today. Well, actually, where is that from? Like an older issue or from a more modern?
New Teen Titans, yeah. They don't really do a lot with Cyborg other than just use him for diversity reasons now. So it's actually kind of sad.
I feel like they've kind of watered him down too.
They have. They've completely ripped him of his character.
I think part of that has to do with the fact that he's been extracted from his native territory, right? Instead of
something else being put onto the Justice League instead of being on the Teen Titans,
right? Well, and by himself.
They did that because they didn't want to use somebody like Jon Stewart. And I'm sorry, guys, unpopular opinion here, but Hal Jordan is not the best Green Lantern. There are better Green Lanterns.
Yeah,
and I love him too much. Leave my stream at once. Goodbye.
They took Cyborg and they put him in the JLA.
They put him in
another black dude to increase diversity.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a lot of comic book commentary sites make or talk about this back before it became such a touchy subject. And I remember a lot of people were saying, or like a lot of mainstream comic sites were like, yeah, everyone can kind of see why Cyborg's here.
Well, okay, here's the thing about the New Teen Titans. Each character they're fit for each other. They're designed to work off of each other. They're designed to have different ideologies. They're designed to be like a corner, like they're designed to be a piece of the puzzle. So when you take a piece of that puzzle away, the Titans do suffer. I mean, New 52 Teen Titans suffered, and Cyborg. What people seem to forget is Cyborg was one of the only few Titans that stayed with him in the 2000s, because a lot of the other Titans moved off. I mean, even Starfire, which was her core, like she stayed in Titans for most of her run. She was off world. She was in other books. Cyborg was one of the only ones that still stayed with Titans books.
Yeah, they tried to make it a rehash of Young Justice.
Huh?
They tried to make a rehash of Young Justice after they realized that was what was actually selling originally.
Well, and Jeff, I was just talking earlier today about this, but Jeff Johns, who is a very talented writer, I don't want to take anything away from what talent he has, but editors ought to be snapping those fingers like a nun with a ruler, because he has this tendency to strip the guts out of something to build his new stories. And
right.
when he did what he did to the Young Justice kids in the Teen Titans book in the early 2000s was, in my mind, virtually criminal, because it stripped the heart out of those characters.
Well, at that time, DC was going in a much darker direction, because I actually liked his run on Teen Titans, because before and after then, Titans kind of sucked. He was kind of the only guy he's definitely no Mark Wolfman or George Perez, but he was kind of the only one that's came even an ounce close to it, because every other Titan story hasn't really reached that popularity. Even Rebirth Teen Titans, which is fantastic, by the way. I definitely recommend reading the first Rebirth run of that. I believe it's the first 3 volumes, because the new volume kind of sucks. But even more modern stories, they don't really, they're not as popular, and they're not like, and it sucks because his stories, I mean, yeah, he did kind of ruin some of the Young Justice characters like Superboy. I feel like Superboy kind of suffered the most out of that, but he was also in a situation where DC was trying to go darker with their characters.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with editorial. I don't want to spend the whole time bagging on Jeff Johns, but I think a lot of I don't care for a lot of what he did to the Flash toward the end of his run with that. I don't care for a lot of the world building inside of Aquaman. His treatment of the characters is good, but the world in which they inhabit has been gutted in a lot of ways.
Well, how do you think I felt? He turned my favorite character into a depressing character that literally didn't even like Earth.
Yeah,
I actually wanted to ask you, Pope Fire, how do you feel about Lobdell in around 2011?
Don't even.
I'm kind of curious.
Okay, we're talking New 52, yes?
Yep.
Okay, guys, am I allowed to curse here?
Sure.
Okay, excuse my French stream, but that series was fucking garbage. Not only Starfire's whole character is completely opposite of what she's supposed to be. This is the inspiration for Titan Starfire, which is why Titan Starfire is absolute garbage. But this Starfire, I kid you not, it was supposed to be Blackfire. I swear it was supposed to be Blackfire because every other character on the Outlaws, they had something that they needed to be redeemed for. Jason Todd needed to be redeemed for his mistakes. Roy Harper needed to be redeemed for his mistake. Starfire's just there because freaking tits. And yeah, that was the best she's ever been drawn. Like, that is a freaking amazingly sexy Starfire. But her character was so un-Starfire that while I was reading it, I was like, oh, it's going to turn out that she's Blackfire. But no, and this is what pisses me off even more. They turned Blackfire into the good sister in that series. And for some reason, whatever reason, DC has stuck with Blackfire just being misunderstood ever since. Blackfire has done some messed up stuff, and I'm actually going to be doing a video on some of the stuff she's done. And most Starfire fans, most Teen Titans fans, still consider, even with the more modern rehash of, well, Blackfire was just misunderstood. No, most Teen Titans fans still consider Blackfire an evil son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't take anything from New 52 as like a good portrayal of any of the characters.
But the only one it actually benefited for was Aquaman and Huntress and Power Girl. Those were the only stories I liked.
No, they didn't. They were horrible renditions.
Green Lantern I really liked, but the thing is that basically was almost completely unaffected by the reboot. It was just Johns continuing to write.
Yeah, the thing with Jeff Johns is you got to understand that he's horrible with compression and expansion of anything. So if you're going to give him something to write, you can't have him write to a trade. You have to have it be like, here, what do you want to write? Okay, write it until it's complete and ignore the trade paperback thing. And if you give him a character that he doesn't like, he'll destroy it.
Oh, yeah, you could definitely tell that.
Batman Year One, that was garbage. And it was Jeff Johns because he hates it.
So what was that? I'm sorry, you cut out?
If you read Batman Year One, Jeff Johns has destroyed that character.
Okay. Was that the Year Zero story?
Or
was there a different Year One that I'm not aware of?
The Earth one.
Earth One. Okay. All right. Okay, I got you.
It was supposed to be part of this whole Earth One series, but I don't think it was very popular. I think they only did like Superman and Batman, and then they just dropped it.
I think they did a Wonder Woman too. I think I saw
Wonder Woman and Green Lantern, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think it was written. I don't think they were written by Johns. I'm not.
Okay, Teen Titans Year One was actually really good. That's one of my favorite Teen Titans stories.
Yeah. I'm thinking. Or is it Earth One? Were the series called Earth One or is it Year One?
Yeah, it's Earth One. No, the one that I'm talking about is Earth One.
Oh, yeah, no, that one's awful.
Yeah, Year One is usually saved for good books, as far as I know.
They've used that branding on several different products. Of course, it started with Batman Year One, and then DC has done Doug Dixon actually, and I found this out on the Sweetcast about last month when he interviewed Chuck Dixon. But Chuck Dixon was pitching a
That cut out for
Yeah, I've been having
a series
internet
of
problems
trades
all day.
that were years. Robin year mini series that was Dick Grayson's. It was Dick Grayson's story from Batman Year 3, but from Dick's perspective. And then they did a Batgirl Year 1 that was a retelling of the Batgirl origin plus stuff. And both he did those with Scott Beatty back in, I want to say, 02. Those were really solid.
So you guys reading any current books right now?
Morrison Green Lantern is the schniz.
See, I actually just picked up a comic of that because people were recommending it. I was recently told that reading Marvel and DC is bad, so I've been reading more Marvel and DC.
Honestly, like when people say it, like I think, in my personal opinion, a lot of it's uninteresting. Like Tom King went from a kind of controversial love him or hate him to I think everybody hates him now.
Heroes in Crisis is
I've just not wanted to pick that up, especially since I heard there was something in it like, oh, Harley Quinn overpowers Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman at the same time. How powerful she is. Share that on Facebook, Queen Girls. I bet that'll make you really cool, and you'll look real knowledgeable sharing this information around.
Okay. 9 times out of 10, if you ever meet a girl that says she's a Harley Quinn fan, fake. She's fake. Don't trust her. Like I've met one person that actually likes Harley Quinn that's actually picked up a comic.
You know what I was actually thinking about recently is somebody pointed it out because there's the big push for Harley Ivy, and someone said it's kind of a bad relationship because Ivy's manipulative.
Yeah, but it's okay if it's manipulation is coming from a same sex relationship as long as it makes the SJWs happy.
Because they need positive representation and. They're just continuing a different kind of abuse for Harley.
Yeah, Ivy's not manipulative in the Ivy Harley relationship, but they still get it wrong because she's supposed to be a big sister role to Harley.
I've seen bits where Ivy is like kind of playing it kind of weird. Like I'm not.
I haven't seen it since they've turned it into a lesbian relationship. So
it's kind of the thing about it being a lesbian relationship, though, is I don't even know if they're fully committed to that.
They're not. It's very inconsistent. It's mostly been Elseworld stuff, actually.
And I agree with Durkin. I think that's a good dynamic if you're dealing with the big sister little sister kind of a thing. That was kind of how they did it in the Batman the Animated Series. But I just at the same time, it's just sort of one of those things where I dislike the Harley Quinn character enough that I'm not vested in caring whether or not it's a good portrayal.
I like her, but she's pushed way too hard, and I feel like her identity has shifted way too strangely in the past decade.
She's the Deadpool of DC. She's only there to appeal to normies that don't actually buy her book. And I can confirm this because Harley Quinn actually sells more than Wonder Woman, but neither are really doing that well in shops. Yeah. They're still not making the money that Batman and Superman are making. And again, if you like Harley Quinn, that's fine. Nobody's going to judge you for it. But
except me.
Except for a handful of people. If you like the New 52 Harley.
But no, Harley's been on this spiral of appealing more towards the Tumblr girls or the girls that watch Arrow in your high school that are like, oh my god, he took his shirt off. That's actually why I didn't watch Arrow, by the way, because the girls that would make fun of you for reading comics were the same ones that were like, Arrow was so hot. That.
And like the same thing with like when Pokemon became popular again a couple of years ago with Pokemon Go. Like, because I remember being picked on in middle school all the time, and people were like, dude, that game is like, are you gay? And I'd be like, no. What does that have to do with anything? And they're like, why are you still playing Pokemon? And these kids that like made fun of me, and years later, it's like, oh my god, dude, I just found this Pokemon. Like, oh man, I love Pokemon. I love Pokemon since I was a little kid. And like, you're holding them back, shouting every name in the book at them.
I would like to point out one thing about the Harley Quinn conversation is that much like I was pretty much entirely exhausted and burnt out on Joker as a character until Batman White Knight. That is also the only time I've read a Harley story that I didn't just set me on edge. that Sean Gordon Murphy nailed so much with that story that even things I hated, I loved.
Well, that's the thing. Like, that's one of the reasons why I hate current modern Harleys, because she was really one of those characters that was really interesting when she was first introduced in the animated show. So what's frustrating is that she has had good runs. She's had good characters. She's had good development. She has one of my favorite backstories, but it's been stripped away from her over time to the point where it's not really there. It's not even really appealing towards women, because the modern Harley Quinn stories are appealing to Tumblr people and only Tumblr people. Because again, if you want to appeal to women, you can still write a good story. Women don't just like trash stories.
All the villains of DC are garbage now because they all switched them. Well, at least the Batman Rogues Gallery villains, because they switched them all to being
Sympathetic. Yeah.
Well, no, they're just all psychos. They don't
Yeah.
have a, they go, they're psychotic and therefore they just have a glitch in this direction, rather than flipping that and having it, they're like this and that's what makes them psychos. They're
See, like,
perfectly
when it
bad.
comes to being psychotic, it's like on a spectrum. There's like this, it's a wide range of different things, and I don't like when it's all or this is kind of a long running issue with comics, is it kind of falls back to they're crazy. And
Yeah,
like,
that's
they
the
just all
problem.
act the same.
Well, and I mean, part of that comes to is part of the question comes to is that there is a legitimate desire on behalf of some storytellers to legitimize the behavior, the silly behaviors from old comics, right? And since nobody would really dress up like a clown, obviously they must be mad, right?
Well, I mean,
But that's just one impulse, and I don't think that's the biggest one. I think one of the largest issues that we have is that people are afraid, that some people, I should say, are afraid to deal with the implications of human evil. And so they lean on the crazy instead of leaning on the evil. And you get somebody like the Riddler, right, who may have a compulsion to tell stories, but he has a passionate desire to steal from you because he believes he's owed it.
See,
Well,
when
no,
it comes,
that's not
I would
Riddler
say,
at all.
I think
Riddler is all about he thinks he's better than you and that's why he's doing that.
I like
Yeah,
I like him being manipulative. Like, I've always thought of him as kind of crazy and more of the, oh, is it? I've always get these mixed up. Socio is when you just don't really care about the feelings of others. He likes
Yeah.
toying with people, and he likes that, like, he plays his games. He likes to show that
Well,
he's better.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to actually an example of this happening, well, for my experience, an example of this happening is look at the character Tara. She was pure evil.
Right.
They've tried to justify that, and I understand it a little bit more with the cartoon, but over time in comics they've tried to justify it, trying to give her a sadder and sadder backstory, and they do the same with other Titans villains like Blackfire, where they turn her from somebody that sold her own sister into slavery and watched her get raped and tortured into somebody that's like, well, she just was messed over by their parents. You know, it wasn't that she was just born evil, which can happen. People can be born evil. Instead it's just, well, this is what happened. And that's one thing. I mean, I like sympathetic villains, but I do think that, you know, some of your villains can just be evil.
And just be
Like,
bad people.
they can
Yeah.
be just pure evil, and I don't like how comics have sort of taken that away and instead of turned it into, well, they're just crazy or they're this and this. And again, I like the characters that seem to be pure evil because it's more satisfying when they get taken down.
The
You don't
only
even have-
objection I have to this is old Sinestro and similar villains, where like you read those Silver Age issues and it's just like, and they were amazed by his true evil, or like,
that
you know,
one
the
time
character goes like, I'm
there's
evil.
40 cakes.
You don't even you don't have to go to the villains for this though. One of the best examples I have for that, like I can call off the top of my head, is Tim Drake, and
Mhm.
it shows what is actually wrong with what happened is that they got the character wrong in a really interesting way. He has all the same personality traits, but all the personality traits that he had in before New 52, they were the positive versions of those traits. He was confident. Now he's arrogant.
Well, that's because with New 52 they tried to make everybody more. They made everybody more like Bruce Wayne in costumes, because even Superman came off feeling like Bruce Wayne in a Superman outfit. They didn't really try to keep the characters positive. They didn't try to keep any positive traits because they wanted each character to be dark, gloomy, and really appeal to 13-year-old boys. Because I remember the con where Dan Gildo pretty much came out and said, we don't want old fans, we want new fans. And you could tell from how they were trying to appeal to 13 to 14-year-old boys, which isn't a problem, but you can do it with a good story, because a lot of these characters a lot of these books in New 52 were inconsistent, boring, and the characters weren't even likable. And even for 13-year-old boys, you still can appeal to them in a positive way. You can give them positive role models other than what we got with New 52.
And I think that's actually a really important point. Speaking as a former 13-year-old boy,
Yeah.
right? When I started reading comics, it was Dixon writing Tim Drake, right? Before his original series, in that miniseries that Robin miniseries that Dixon wrote was one of my first superhero comic experiences. And I was 100% sold on that version of Tim Drake, who was flawed and was striving to be better and didn't think he had the stuff to live up to it, but was so driven to his mission, to his desire to be helpful and to believing in what Batman could mean, that he was willing to exceed beyond his capacity to become that guy. And that was one of the things that just drove me to it. And that's like Durkin said, talking about Tim and his confidence. That was a hard-won confidence.
Well, why Tim Drake is the best Robin, in my opinion, why he sold the most books with his Robin solo run.
He's the best character and the only true hero of all comics.
Well, because he stepped up. I love those characters that are doing it not because they have to or because of a tragedy that happened, but because they were needed. And he stepped up as Robin because he was needed.
That's one of my favorite aspects of Miles Morales, who I really didn't care for until Spider-Verse. Because, I mean, before then, he still had that where he stepped up because Peter died, but he really wasn't an interesting character, in my opinion, until Spider-Verse came along. And I really like that, especially the way it's portrayed in the movie, that, like, you know, he recognizes he's not ready, but he's got to throw himself into this because he's needed.
And I would like to point out, too, that, you know, up until the early 2000s, I think there were more true heroes in comics that did it, to steal Derek's term here, but that were heroic because heroism was needed. That it wasn't some sort of deeply personal thing. You look at that before, you know, at Barry Allen before he was dead, right? Before he came back from the dead, his origin had always been that he was just a cop, and that's just what you do. And suddenly, when you can move at lightning speed, you keep doing the things you've always been doing faster, right? But then all of a sudden, you know, Jeff Johns gets a hold of him, gives him a tragic backstory, you know, he gives him a personal motivation for his actions, and he stops being altruistic, and I think stops being that interesting.
Yeah,
I need to have more background information on the Flash, because as much as I do enjoy the Flash as a character, I haven't read as much stuff about him.
Yeah,
I've only read Wally. I'm not big into Barry.
What I mean by is that he was given the option to walk away, to stop being that, and he would have had a great life. It was his choice to actually make the sacrifices that he didn't have to. Whereas Superman, he would have become Superman no matter what in some capacity. Same with Batman, same with everyone. They all had tragedy beforehand, and that led them into being who they are. Whereas Tim Drake, he's the only character that I can think of, that I can recall of any of the comics that I've ever read, where he's like, no, this has to be done, and there's going to be sacrifices, but I got to make them because that's the right thing to do.
Well, that's why I like Starfire's, because she has had that tragic backstory, but she wants to move past it. She helps people because she can, because she wants to, because she's a passionate, compassionate person. Compassionate. She has empathy for people, and she's able to relate to them, even if she's not even from the Earth, even if she's not even from their planet. She just loves helping people, and that's one thing that always drew me to Starfire, was that, yeah, she's gonna help people regardless.
This is sort of off the topic, but it's really interesting, and not something I really stopped to think about before. But in some ways, Starfire's story is the inverse, or at least the converse of Superman's, right?
Yeah.
Superman has great power, and he has this. He's been taught responsibility for his neighbors, right? You do what you can for the people around you. That's what you do. It's the Kansas farmer mentality, right? Which is why Kevin Costner's lines in Batman v Superman misses the point entirely. Anyway, but point being, that Midwestern farmer attitude that you do for your neighbors and you do for your family. And what can Superman do? Anything. So he has an obligation because that's the right thing to do, right? But there's, like, to Durkin's point, there's very little sacrifice for the Man of Steel. But one of the things you're talking about with Starfire, instead of having the concept of duty drive her, she has the concept of empathy drive her. But she has a similar in terms of what she brings to the table. Not, of course, the same power set, but there's a similarity there. I think that's a really interesting parallel.
Well, actually, Timoranians are like distant, very, very distant cousins of Kryptonians. I don't remember what book that's from. I read a lot of Starfire, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's the same thing I have with Batman, because I read like all of the Batman family from like 1986 to the present at the time, which was like around 2011. All in like one huge thing is like 4,000 books, and it's like, I know that happened somewhere in those books.
Yeah,
and it was like over the course of a year or 2 year period.
Well, when I was younger, I used to be able to remember what happened in every issue, and I'd sit there with my big stacks of comics and I'd flip through them, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one and this one and this one.
Oh no, I have my big stack here that I'm flipping through because I want to make sure I want to make sure I don't give out wrong information.
I can't do that anymore because I'm 41 on Tuesday. That's step 1. And step 2 is that I now, instead of having, like 3 or 4 long boxes, I have 5 file cabinets. So
I have 21. Okay, I have 21 long boxes and 8 short boxes.
Yeah. I don't know what that would come to in long boxes, but I've got a bunch.
Yeah. Comics are an addiction, and this is one thing that I've had a gripe with Comicsgate is that they don't understand that this is an addiction and this is a very expensive hobby, which is why I don't get me wrong, I love Comicsgate. I love that we're actually getting books out now, or at least attempting to. But one of my gripes with Comicsgate is that a lot of them are really overpriced, and I've even set up a program to help people afford some of these books, because some of these people are like, I can't afford that. I want to support. I want this book. I just can't afford it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree.
Yeah, if I could cut the price, I would, because I don't think that's actually a fair price. But there's no way to cut the price at.
Oh no, I totally understand. I think we should be trying to get them in the stores, though. I feel like that would be very beneficial.
One thing I really did like was cheaper options. For a lot of people, they still have them pretty high price, even for digital only. But Andrew Huerta did his for just $8. You can get his. I don't remember how big the book is, like off the top of my head, but it's an expensive amount of pages for $8 digital, and his artwork is fantastic.
See,
even the artist and writer, which cuts all that price down.
I mean, even my pull list, because my pull list is like $40 for my local comic shop, and I'm barely getting any comics. So I'm a bit frustrated that this is because this is already a very expensive hobby. And then, like, if I want to follow a handful of books, because really I'm only following Batman Beyond, Odyssey, Nightwing. I'm gonna drop Nightwing pretty soon because I'm tired of the fucking Rick Grayson shit. I'm picking up Daredevil, and then I was picking up Titans, but that's canceled. And I have been reading Heroes in Crisis because I like the arts.
I want to talk to you about that in a second. But before we get there, this is a really great segue to talk about what I actually asked you on here to talk about.
Yes, and what's that?
Which was the future of comics, right? So there is, right now, I think we are at a convergence between 2 business models and 2 philosophies of comic books, right?
Right.
And one is the direct-to-consumer indie market that's going on, right? And then there is the store-modeled direct, the quote-unquote direct market, comic shop, big 2 kind of thing going on.
You want to know what both those have in common? Do you honestly, my honest opinion, they limit their audience. They do not try and appeal to everybody. They try to appeal to certain groups, and that's why both are eventually going to fail. And Comicsgate is doing very well so far, but there's still comics that are failing in Comicsgate, and that was something that we were told wouldn't happen, and it's happening. And again, it's not really to blame. it's not really blaming everybody in Comicsgate. Like, yeah, because I know that not everybody can back every book, but if we make it to where everybody can appeal to these comics, because look at one of the biggest comics on Indiegogo right now. It's from a Teen Titans fan artist.
Mhm.
He's doing fantastic because his audience isn't limited. And unfortunately, when you limit your audience to only Comicsgate, you're only going to get a handful of people spending money on stuff. And again, it's fine to market just to Comicsgate because Comicsgate is a very passionate group. But at the same time, you should be trying to get a bigger audience other than just what we have now, because Comicsgate does seem like it's limiting itself and it's not really trying to grow. And even, that's the same with DC and Marvel, because they're trying to appeal to SJWs and only to SJWs. I mean, look at the Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy is a perfect example of that, because that was a friendship turned to a relationship sort of thing based on shipping alone. And I hate shippers, by the way. But when you limit your audience, you're eventually going to kill, because comics are dying. There's no doubt about that. We are at a worse spot than we were when the comics were about to crash. Comic shops are struggling staying alive. They're having to sell Funko Pops. And I know everybody here hates Funko Pops, or I imagine most people do not like them. But right now, they're sort of the only thing, like collectibles, back issues. Those are the things that people are buying, because modern freaking comics are $4 freaking dollars, $5 if you want an issue 1. And the only thing, like, you're either gonna get a good writer but terrible art, and terrible writer or good art. I mean, Heroes in Crisis is a perfect example of that. I don't buy this because I like the writer. I buy this because the panels on it are absolutely beautiful. I haven't read Heroes in Crisis since issue 3, but I've been looking at the panels. All right, I'm not interested in this book. I'm interested in the art.
Yeah,
Right.
that need to expand. That's why whenever I color, I consider like color. Like I color a page like almost every day, or I've been trying to. And I always look at, like, if it's not something that is comic related, there's more likely of a chance that I'll color it, because then I can tag that other person and bring that group into it.
Well, I mean, again, I'm gonna bring this guy up. I can't pronounce his name. I think it's like Ricarn or something. I've actually talked to him a handful of times, so I should know his name by now, but I don't. He built his audience by appealing to an audience that has been pretty much forgotten by DC, because they don't realize the Teen Titans fandom has a massive gold mine, and they just ignore it.
Are you talking about the Icarus book?
Yeah, it's actually doing really well. I'm super excited for that book as well. But he built his audience by not limiting himself by politics. He built it because he was appealing to a fan base that had been pretty much forgotten, and he expanded his fan base to not just Teen Titans fans, but to people that just, liked art. And he's able to get his Indiegogo starting, and it's doing fantastic. And I don't think he's done streams or anything. He just put his book out, and people are like, "Holy heck, you're cool, man."
Well, he spent a lot of times doing other things that got him a name too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely did, but it is interesting to see the difference between what he's done, which was really diversify his audience to where it's not just one group of people, but it's multiple different people at once. And I would love if Comicsgate was like, wait, we should be appealing to children, we should be appealing to all types of people other than just people that agree with us.
That's also part of the reason why I write my web novel, and I plan on setting a new web novel series in the same universe that I plan on putting out there, but it's more directed at that web novel Japanese light novel audience.
Well, and that actually brings up not directly what you were saying, Derek, and although I think that the idea about cross-marketing is a really important one for every business, because if you're an artist and you create anything, there are people that may be interested in the other things you create too, and I think that's important. But we're talking about limiting audiences. This is a thing that's really been a factor in the Twitter spheres in the last 2 weeks. There's been a big debate, and I don't want to get into too much about all of that in terms of the specifics of it, but it just seems like there are dedicated people on all sides of the issue of comic books that just are dedicated to the proposition to keep those bastards out, whatever that they define that as, right?
I don't want to talk too much on that because
But my question is why? Can you imagine any reason why that's a thing? That's what I'm asking. I mean, you've
power,
tons of people,
it's power. That's
It's
all it
power
is.
and money.
and that's what I don't get. Is it's just like the whole issue when this thing started, right? Not even when it started. That's not even the right word. But the whole issue we've been dealing with in the last 2 years in the comics industry, in the comics fandom, from all sides of this, the go word from people that weren't resigned to keeping things the way they are was a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Right.
And we've forgotten that you have to raise ships, that you have to continue to raise the tide. You can't just keep feeding off the same dead corpse, to be grotesque about it. And I don't understand why people seem to have such a hard time understanding that aspect.
Well, yeah, you also have to bring other people with you to do that, and you have to support and promote other people. You have to link to them and all like that. And a lot of people just aren't doing that.
One thing actually, one change I'd like to see more of, and I am a little biased on this, but more webcomics. I feel like a lot of people go straight for the Indiegogo route. And webcomics, I think, are kind of the way of the future. They're immensely popular,
they are.
especially with younger women. But
no, see, I'm going to say this right now. We should be appealing to children in comics. That's what comics should be made for.
Honestly,
as
yes.
much as I love comic books, I got into comics as a young girl. When I look at modern comics now, and I'm so sorry, Matt, for interrupting you. I have to go pretty soon, so I just want to say this last point. I got into comics when I was a kid. I got into them when I was 8 on Judas Contract. I shouldn't have been reading that book, but I read it. Modern comics now are appealing only to girls, and I'm sorry, most young girls are not interested in comics. Boys, I've noted because I volunteer with children. When you get a comic that boys will like, they will improve their reading because they want to read these stories, because they like the characters, because they can look up to these characters. We should not have it limiting to only young female girls that aren't even buying these books. Now, I do want to say before I have to go, we are raising money for the Sporkman colorist who is now battling his 3rd run with cancer. So if you do, like, we're selling like these little chibi designs, like icons and stuff, for $10, and all the proceeds will go to him. We will also be sending Batman Detective Comics issue 1000 to various artists like Gary Shipman and Eric Ninotowski. They're going to draw something on it, and then they're going to send a portion of what they auction off to the Sporkman colors as well. And I am so sorry that I was late and I had to leave early. I love all of you guys. Thank you for letting me be on here, and I will have a fantastic night. See you guys.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming, Pope Fire. Everybody, Pope Fire.
Yes, Pope Fire. Yes. Bye, guys.
Raven is better.
All right. So
she's gone.
Yeah, one thing actually coming off of that, and I think we've talked about this before, but you ever notice that in cartoons and in everything, they always say that they always show the kids reading comics. They never show like the actual target audience of like teens to adults that read comics, but they always show little kids, like in cartoons and everything. Like little kids, they love video games, comics, and like they'll be sitting there reading their comic book. And in real life, that doesn't happen, sadly.
That's an artifact of the 1950s, 1960s, when it was believed that comics and cartoons were made for kids. They've never been made for kids.
Well, not exclusively, at the very least.
No, it's an idea that they're made for kids. That's a wrong idea. They're made for everyone.
Right.
And it just happened. Like if you watch Power Rangers and you do it as an adult, you'll notice that there's actually a whole bunch of jokes in there that are more adult oriented. And that's a lot of with the Warner Brother cartoons too. You look at it now and there's adult comedy in there. But as a kid, you can watch that. And the target audience for most of that stuff was actually soldiers overseas fighting in World War II. You know that's who?
Yeah, that's something I always thought interesting. That was at one point comics that was a big enough deal that it was motivating, and it was, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think that was our birthplace, or that was kind of the birthplace of American superhero comics.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that people are like, "Oh, there's a whole bunch of soldiers in comics yet." It's like, yeah, because soldiers have always liked comics.
Yeah.
That's completely expected.
And that's one of the things too that like you look at like the evolution of comics from the 30s through the 50s and how they were very much of a medium that was targeted toward everyone. And then you look at the parallel industry from the 60s to present in Japan and how it's still comics there are very much for everyone. That there are genres that cater toward younger kids that don't have all of the content or whatever else, and they've got the ones that are targeted toward young girls or whatever else. And I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to sit here and know all the names and everything. I'll have Marmaduke fan on sometime to talk about that probably. But that's one of the things like I think the potential, and actually I know the potential for that kind of a thing exists in this country to have a birth to death comic book industry. But what we don't have is I really believe that I believe part of the problem we have is distribution, how we pulled that thanks to the exclusivity with the comic shops, and nothing against comic shops. I love comic shops. But when I was growing up, you could get comics at every corner store, you get comics at every grocery store, right? And people would read comics. And even my friends that made fun of me for reading comics, they would still ask to borrow my comics, right? Everybody was reading comics and they were easy to buy. And it was one of those things. But now you have to go to a special store that's run by people that might be a little sketchy, right? Or might not,
Anyone that knows anything about economics can tell you why shops are failing. It's because comic shops are a secondary market. They're not a primary market.
Yes.
And secondary markets make their money off of you coming in and buying collectibles and buying and selling your stuff and then reselling that for profit. It's a stock market type thing. It is not a primary market. It doesn't bring in new customers. It doesn't do anything that you want as a business. So you should never look at comic book shops or anything like a collectible shop or a pawn shop or whatever you want to, like anything in that vein, as the health of your industry. It just shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be.
Well, and I think the new customers is a really important aspect about that. Because like my local comic shop here in my little Western Nebraska town, right? We have a shop that sells new and used comics, right? But they're predominantly a game store, right? Comics is a secondary thing for them that they've been able to rope enough people that come in there to buy video games that they're like, oh, you like comics too? Here you go. But that they could never have been able to offer comics if they already didn't have a successful business selling used video games and magic cards, right? That's their bread and butter.
Which is kind of sad because knowing how magic cards are sold, that's a horrible way to make a business too.
Yeah, we've got. I'm not even gonna meddle with that. We've got a town of like less than 50,000 people, so being able to get comics off the shelf is fun for me.
And you asked me earlier, what are my inspirations? I'm more of a manga fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently reading World Trigger, which is a shonen book. I read Bleach and Naruto, obviously. But one of my favorite books is Liar Game and Gantz. If you've ever heard of them, probably not.
I've heard of Gantz.
Yeah, it's good up until the end. In both the anime and the manga, it just falls flat, and it's really bad at the end of it. So up until that point, great. Just don't read the end.
So I have to ask, is it an ending as bad as BVS?
Maybe worse.
Oh my God! Ah!
Because it's building up this entire thing that's supposed to be happen. We don't know why this whole thing is happening in Gantz, and they give you the answer, and it's nonsense.
Oh man, that's
like I said earlier, I'm into philosophy, and I'm looking at that. I'm like, that makes no sense at all.
that sounds almost like the end of Lost.
Yeah, it's probably close to that.
Oh man. Well, and like honestly, when it comes to, for those of you who haven't seen Lost, I'm not going to spoil anything about it. Um, and it's worth watching up until the last two episodes, but you'll watch those anyway. Um, the problem with the end of Lost that um, isn't just that it ends, and it doesn't. I don't even think that it's that it misses the point of the story. I think it's just because the story they were always telling is a little bit stupid, and they told a story that was a little bit stupid really really well.
I didn't watch Lost because at the very beginning I realized what it was off the bat, and I was like, yeah, they're just making this up as they go along. They don't actually have a big reveal at the end. So I never got sucked in.
No, I think they actually. I think that's not true. I think they did have what they thought was a big reveal at the end, but the problem is that it was stupid, and so I think they were always leading up to something that was just a little bit dumb.
Yeah, I would have questioned that like a few years ago, but having seen like more of J.J. Abrams' work and that team's work, I'm leaning more towards that. It was just that dumb from the beginning.
Maybe. Abrams doesn't always know what to put in his little mystery box. So
yeah, you get a kind of a crapshoot with manga because they sort of go and they get popular and then they just keep on getting voted as whether they're good or not, and then when they're fall under a certain limit of the voting, they're like, yeah, you're gonna be canceled in like 3 months. And the artists and writers is just like, we have to end it. Like,
right.
and they have to finish up whatever arc that they've been working on. So you end up with either a story that doesn't end, or you get one that has a really weird ending. But like again, I'm also reading things like Skip Beat, which I don't know where it's going. It seems like the story has ended already to a certain degree, and it just keeps going. And it's really weird following. I like idol manga and anime, so you watch that. It's like I don't want this to end, but it's gonna end, and it's sort of like a crapshoot where it's going to end. Because how do you end a story about girls becoming idols? The whole point is they become idols, and then you also want to see them continue on, but where do you stop? So it's just random wherever they stop, sort of thing.
See, that actually reminds me of Spider-Man, because the Spider-Man, as from the '60s up until the '90s, was the story of a young man, of a boy becoming a man, right? And then he'd become a man, and the final arc in his journey from boyhood to manhood was fatherhood. And then at the end of the Clone Saga, they just squashed that, and it just seems like they've been telling the same story now for 20 years or 30 years.
For that. It's because we in the West have forgotten the fact that there's actually the same with the idea of there's 3 ages of like motherhood or femininity, which is like maidenhood, motherhood, and then the hag or the witch or whatever you want to call it. There's also the apprentice, the master, and the sage for men, and we only get the apprentice stage ever.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I would love to have seen, in fact, if I could have been in a seat of power in 1996 when all of that was going down, the vision I saw then at the time was the same one I hold today, that, you know, they wanted to have a Peter Parker that they could tell all the single stories about, but that's not where the character was. The character had evolved beyond that. So why not take Pete, put him in a kids-only book, move him out to the suburbs, you know, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and then develop and craft a new character to tell the apprentice type stories with.
That's the funny thing with Spider-Man, is because they had me where they were going, because it was during Civil War or right before, and it was I saw news of Spider-Man revealing his secret identity, and he was a teacher. I was like, that's an interesting story, and that would have taken him into that mentor role to grow. Yep. Imagine if Miles Morales was introduced into that setting where he's now being taught by Spider-Man, which gives you that idea for whatchamacallit, Into the Spider-Verse.
Right.
But that's also where they're like, nope, he has to forget Mary Jane and all like that.
Yeah, one more day makes me so angry. We had Nerd Wonder on about a month ago, and somebody just offhanded mentioned Joe Quesada, and she went on a 15-minute blue air rant about One More Day. It was hilarious. I just sat there, I just leaned back in the chair and laughed the whole time.
Yeah, unlike most people, I like Ultimate Marvels, and I don't really care for the regular Marvel. So
see, and that's a conversation that I do not want to get into today, but we have to have you back to talk about that because I hate Ultimate so much, and I would love to hear your reasons for liking it, because I'm always curious about why people like a thing.
It's really, really simple.
Okay.
It's that they allow the universe to evolve.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. The characters are pretty decent, and they allow the universe to evolve, whereas like Marvel and DC, both are static. You know what you're pretty much getting. And that is also that dynamic of the universe evolving. You got those odd things where Mr. Fantastic became evil, and you got Spider-Man dying and becoming Miles Morales, and you got, these other events that happened. Whereas with regular Marvel, you pretty much know that Spider-Man's alive. He's always going to be Peter Parker. And Tony Stark is always going to be Iron Man, even if they die or whatever. They're going to come back. Superman came back. Batman came back. The Flash came back. I mean, they all come back in regular continuities.
Okay,
and
I'll give you that point 100%. And I'll tell you, like with our superhero universe, I will write with Ideal Comics. Dead means dead, with very, very rare exceptions that are part of a later mysterious reveal, right? But that's one of those things that I do agree with wholeheartedly, that we don't have real stakes in most modern comics, and I can definitely see that aspect of Ultimate Marvel being appealing. But yeah, that's a heck of a thing right there.
The only place where they really mess up is actually with the Ultimates, because they don't follow any of the canon within the story, and they keep on changing it. Each iteration of the Ultimates. That's the other one that's really
like their own canon.
Yeah, every time they write the Ultimates, their Avengers story, listen to their lore and their canon, everything that's in the book, and then you read the next one. They usually have retconned everything that they put in the last one, or enough that it's really kind of screwy.
Weird.
And they do it in all 3 volumes of that book.
Yeah, one of my biggest problems with the Ultimate series was that they were so excited about being able to do anything that they stuck the names of characters onto these new creations that don't bear any resemblance to the core of, not the trappings, mind you, but the core of the characters that came before.
You mean like Gwen Stacy becoming Carnage or Venom?
No, I mean more like well, in the case of Ultimate Spider-Man, I felt it was actually too much. And this is one of my beefs. I don't like Bendis as a writer. I just think he kind of relies on everything that came before him, and then takes longer to get to the point. You get the first 6 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, or the first 4 pages of Amazing Fantasy 15. So I just the massive decompression, and it really just annoyed me with his stuff. In fact, up until his Young Justice run that's in stores right now, I have never read a Bendis story that I liked or cared for. I was either ambivalent or actively disliked everything of his I've read. So
yeah, I think that maybe some of that is due to stylized differences due to the time, because you would never write a page like what is it, Fantastic 15 or whatever it was.
yeah.
Amazing Fantasy 15. You would never write that first page like that ever again. Like that's never going to be like that again. So I think that just might be a writing style or a comic stylization.
Well, and the thing is, I would agree. I mean, probably hands down my favorite writer. It's pretty close between Chuck Dixon and James Robinson, right? And both of them, they don't write in that super compressed early Marvel style either, right? They're both much more in lines with modern things, but they don't have any wasted space in their stuff either. There's no air in it. Yeah. There's flow, and there's narrative poetry, and there's all the stuff that it needs to feel like you're reading literature and feel like you're getting moved along. But there's no fluff in it. You're not going to sit there and be just like what was the comic I just read? I can't remember what it was. I picked up a thing off the shelf a couple weeks ago, and the entire it was Aquaman 46, Kelly Sue DeConnick, and two things happened in a 24-page book. Two things, right? The entire story could have been told effectively and beautifully in 9 pages, right? So it was all fluff. It was all fluff. And it was beautiful. The artist they have on it right now, I can't remember the cat's name, but it's gorgeous stuff. And Sue DeConnick, for take for whatever you want, she knows her way around a sentence. It sounds good, but it was laid out in such a way that it's just fluff. There's no substance to it.
See, after you said that, I have to ask you whether you like Dragon Ball Z or not.
I do not like Dragon Ball Z.
I figured not.
I really do, but I only watch Kai because the stuff that's in Z pisses me off because it's useless. There's so much empty space, and it's done on purpose.
Well, it's done semi on purpose because of the way that it's
because of the way the manga had to be done first,
and also America cut out a lot of the jokes in there.
So, and I have to actually explain myself with Dragon Ball Z to give it fair shrift, right? When it was first on the air on Cartoon Network way back in the day, I watched pretty regularly, pretty religiously, and I found the world building and a lot of the characters fascinating. I thought there was some really interesting stuff in all of that. And one day, I'm sitting there, and I hadn't really. The massive time padding hadn't been something that I'd really caught on to like 100%. There'd been some of it, it's like, oh, that could have been shorter, but I hadn't really noticed it because it's very enthralling when you're in the moment.
You had that MMO feeling.
Yeah, it does. That's true. Definitely. I'll give you that for sure. So, but I'm sitting there, and my girlfriend, who is now my wife, walks into my house, and we're all sitting there while Goku's powering up or whatever for a single punch. And she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're watching Dragon Ball Z." And she sits down on the couch next to me, and she watches it for a little while, and she says, "Nothing has happened in 15 minutes." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." And that was the last episode of Dragon Ball Z I watched. It was one of those where I was just like, I'm being taken for a ride for 5 minutes of content. It's not
that bad. But,
well, and like I can't remember who all was on. I think it was when we had Scott on once. He was telling me that there's a cut that's much shorter that has a lot of that stuff shaved out.
I was telling you that Dragon Ball Z Kai, it goes from being 300 episodes long to 169 because of how much bullshit they cut out of it.
So, and like I said, I do find the world building and the characters very interesting. So I may have to seek that out one of these days. But I won't be going to Blockbuster to check it out. I'll tell you that right now.
I'll tell you this: you shouldn't actually, like I did, but you should really pick up the sub version of it, so you can read it for what it is. Because Goku, in the Americanized version, comes off as more heroic when he's kind of not. It doesn't emphasize as much that Goku just doesn't care that much. He really is just spoiling for a fight.
I kind of like that change, if I'm going to be honest. I think the American version does it a little better, in my opinion. I also don't really like Nozawa as Goku. It hurts my ears.
I think that there is something to be said for the West's love of the hero myth, and I know that's not universal, but it's something that like culturally universal. Though many cultures do have that fondness for the heroes, but I think there is a place in story for the Achilles kind of character, for the Cuchulainn, the warrior who loves to just be a warrior and is not that interested in the heroism of it all. And I think that I think that one of the imports of that character in a story is it can reinforce the heroic characters in their action by contrast. When everybody's just a hero, then heroism can seem cheap to the narrative, you know? And that's why I think it's interesting to see a story with, where Lobo and Superman are juxtaposed to each other. Right? Because, Superman is doing things for duty and for right and for the American way, and Lobo just wants to get paid and punch people in the mouth. And sometimes they have the same goals and the same end game, but that doesn't necessarily. Superman shines brighter next to Lobo than he does next to Barry Allen, right? Especially
Have you seen the Vikings, the show Vikings?
I haven't, no.
It has that same sort of character in the character of, what's his name? The main character of the show. Well, I guess the main character. It's from Norse mythology, where he really just wants to sail west and conquer shit.
Oh, Eric the Red?
No, no, it's not that character. He's
Okay.
some other guy. He's from mythology, but I can't remember his name. Bjorn something.
I cannot recall. Anyway,
Bjorn Ironsides? No, that's his son. The father of Bjorn Ironsides. I had his name on my lips like for an entire month or two. And then because I was going through the entire season from 1 to 4, and then I haven't watched the 5th season yet. It's a good series.
Now, speaking about Norse myth, this is actually a good fold over to get a little more information out there about Veil War, right? I'm assuming that it's called Veil War for the idea that the fairy realm and the human realm are separated by the veil. Is that correct?
Yep.
So, does this tie into the idea of spirit nights? The idea that sometimes that veil is thin, and that's when the invasion takes place, or how do you play with those ideas?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with it. That's a good idea, and I do play with that in the other comic that I came up with. But no, in the Veil War, it's you cross the veil through magic. And it was erected thousands of years ago to kind of protect humans, because they don't really have all the magical powers, and they're kind of mundane and all like that. No one knows where it came from, other than that there's some sort of magical presence there, and you need magic to cross it. But what the character is trying to do is they're trying to take down the veil and unify the world.
Okay.
Worlds.
That's cool. That's a different take. That's a different take than I've heard some ways. So, did you happen, speaking of similar concepts, did you happen to see Liam Sharp's The Brave and the Bold, Batman and Wonder Woman, that was out last year?
No.
It's very much Sharp's love letter to a Celtic legend, specifically Irish legend, and it's very fun. it's a murder mystery happens in the other world, and Wonder Woman enlists Batman to come solve the murder mystery, and it's a pretty fun little series. But
yeah, I feel kind of bad for for when I'm in these interviews because it's like, is this like Warhammer? Is this like Lord of the Rings? I'm like, no, I wasn't inspired by any of that. It's like,
well, yeah, this is definitely where inspired. That just was out last year, obviously, but it's definitely a fun story, and I think you might like it. But that being said, though, with Veil War and the your protagonist, the gal, right, who's grew up in Fairy and ends up back on Earth. How does she have like a cast of characters she associates with here, or how does that journey go?
well, she's actually the villain. She's
Okay.
the antagonist.
Okay.
But in the original story, in the original writing, there isn't really much to work with regards to that. She has Merlin with her, her stepfather. That's who raised her and taught her all her magic.
Mhm.
And that's all that she has. But she also has already started to conquer the fairy realm.
Okay.
So there's going to be more introduced on that side. The heroic side, there's nothing really there planned out except for at least not in the first book. There's nothing really there, and that's a huge problem. I'm correcting that. Hopefully, depending on how things go. Like I said, I'm rewriting things a bit. There's 3 guys, and 2 of them are like military vets. One's a military vet. One's a weekend warrior, if you know that term.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a slacktivist. He does everything in half measures. And then you got the gamer streamer, fat dude, just makes his money off of streaming.
That actually brings up something that I meant to ask earlier when you brought up Pratchett. Have you got the feeling for a lot of whimsy going into this project, or?
I don't know. I'm not really whimsical. Sometimes I am. It's in there a little bit, but a lot of my stuff is more serious. Well, here's the thing: is that, like I said, I didn't write this, so there's a definitely serious vibe to the entire thing, but there are jokes in it at later points. Like all the goblin stuff, it's hilarious to a certain. If you have that type of sense of humor, like in the picture that's on the campaign, you see the orcs coming with a pot or whatever they're called, a kettle, or I don't know what they're called.
Cauldron? Is that the one?
I guess cauldron. That's the chief orc's toilet. The orcs are making jokes the entire way about how bad it smells.
Right.
Yeah, so so there's a little bit of potty humor there. And also possibly if I can write humor for a whole script, then it's possible that there'll be a backstory that'll be possibly drawn by Joseph White.
Okay.
So, and that depends on whether I can actually write humor or not. I've not tried yet. I've tried my hand at heroism, horror, and fantasy, and sci-fi. I'm good at those. Not so sure about comedy yet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to get going a little earlier than usual. We're only 10 minutes behind schedule, but I've got to go and do something in real life. I'm really sorry about this. It was great to have you on, Draken, and I know she's not here anymore, but it was great to have Pope Fire on as well.
Yeah, this was definitely our least normal episode as far as scheduling goes, but that's okay.
I think the house party beat that.
I wasn't there for that.
I put out an alternate cover for my campaign before I have an actual cover for my campaign, so everything regarding my campaign is a little bit odd.
Yeah. So when it comes to the story, you've got the two you've got the military trained person, you've got the activist guy, and you've got your gamer fellow. As far as the heroes that are presented with this, how do they get embroiled into this war of the supernatural?
Well, kind of at the beginning, this is the I would have put up the dialogue version of it. It'd be in the first few pages because a lot of it is getting to the point where the two sides come together and clash. And unfortunately, the two sides don't clash in this first book. If it's successful enough and I can find the funds to do it, then I'll go into a second book and that's where all that will happen. But this is mainly setting up. The whatchamacallit, the sorceress or the orphan girl, like I said, she's coming back to try to bring peace by any means necessary. And one of the things that she's trying to do is she's trying to get people to be disarmed. So she's violating the Second Amendment and all like that. She convinces the entire world to give up firearms. And then, some people aren't going to be too happy about that. And one of the three of these guys has a cache of arms.
Right.
So it's like when you're one of the people who with a cache of arms and you got people coming after you, they're probably going to take up arms against the enemies that they were probably planning on using against the government who had just violated their rights.
Right.
In fact, on the campaign site, you can see them loading up the firearms into these massive cauldrons, just melting down military vehicles, military weapons, everything. So when the invasion of the fairy realm starts happening, the world is defenseless. Well, more or less defenseless. Like I said, there are various individuals that have saved up caches of firearms and all like that.
So with that, that's actually, and I probably owe you a little bit of an apology. I was posting a link to the thing in the chat there for folks to go check it out, and I might have missed a detail on here. I want to clarify something. So when the sorceress returns to the mortal realm, right? She very quickly convinces the normies, so to speak, to submit.
Well, at the beginning of the comic, you're being given a speech as to take down the to why she wants to have people disarmed. And it has to do with, she lost her family, and there was a massive, she wants to do it because she lost her family, and she's got a big crowd there, and people today are sort of like that, where they want you to disarm. There's parades and all like that nowadays.
Right.
Well, 8 months go by, and there's a massive tragedy that happens. It's just mentioned. It's not gone into too much detail, but that's the impetus for why they're able to get all this passed. Weirdly enough, that sort of is happening.
Right. No, I mean, it's a very believable setup.
This was all written 10, 15 years ago. And I'm like,
I mean,
there's a wall, there's disarmament. It's like,
it's it's an old story. I mean, Weimar Republic old. I mean, ancient Rome old. It's not disarming the populace for the sake of their own good is it's a damn old thing. That's what that is.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. Her motivations is peace. Yeah, she's a bit like a Batman. in the like you've seen those otherworld stories where Batman gets the power of Superman or given the power of like Green Lantern and he goes kind of nuts. That's kind of what she is.
So
she has the power. Why not use it to inflict totalitarian dictatorship?
Especially for, everybody's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, this was originally supposed to be a game. That was my original idea. And the game idea takes place like 1,500 years in the future, where she's established a long-running empire.
Right.
So
this kind of goes an end run around that, but no, it's really interesting too. With this, do you have any plans in the thing to show her less public persona, right? I mean, is it one of those things where you get to see her as being reasonable, or not reasonable, but sympathetic, off camera, so to speak, away from the public eye, or is it more of a situation like you have with David Bowie in Labyrinth, where he's always this bigger than life character?
I would definitely write it that way today, and next issue will definitely have some of that. But I'm limited in what I can do because, the art's already done, so
Right.
any rewriting and stuff, and that's not in there. It doesn't show her as the sorceress, as I call her, like, or the empress, or however you want to call her. So there's nothing like that, but there are captions which speak to what they're doing, and you figure that she's doing this, she's at the core of it, but you don't see her doing it.
Right. Okay. So she's more of a force in this first issue than a character per se.
Yeah, she's already setting all this stuff in motion. Everything that you see, which is like 16 pages of like disaster film movie, is all her setting up and having put this all in motion.
And so for the first book, you're looking at a 46 page thing. Is that what I'm reading right here?
Yes and no. If I rewrite it, then it'll be 48 pages. Plus, if I add the pages for that I might be doing with Joseph White, it'll be 6 to 8 more pages on top of that, or something like that.
Right.
So it'll be definitely 46 pages plus whatever on top of that.
Okay. And so how many this of course is a first issue, and we're seeing the setup that, and I actually like that idea because it gives us a chance to see the heroes and their reaction first, and I think that's always a fun way to take that, just because it gives you that tour guide into the world, so to speak. That's fun. So how many issues do you have in mind, or have you figured all of that part out yet?
Honestly, it was supposed, like, my plans have completely changed versus what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the setup, it can go on forever. Or I can just end it in the next volume.
Okay.
Or I can just leave it as I could just leave it where it ends off and then do like a video game first-person shooter type game.
Okay.
So
yeah, sometimes it's really fun to see people take their properties and tell new chapters in a different medium. I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Allred's Madman at all or not, but one of the things he did with that property is he had a ancillary story called G-Men from Hell that tied directly into the Mad Men stories, but there was a film version that is an untold chapter that was done as a movie, and it's a wild movie. but yeah, I think taking that story and crossing mediums with it can be real fun.
Yeah, it's really funny with this whole thing because my original idea is to make an RPG out of it, and that's for the 1,500 years in the future thing. And then, as I told people the idea, they're like, you should make this into a first-person shooter. I'm like, like that's not my genre. And someone even offered to set me up an appointment with Hasbro to pitch this idea to them as the first-person shooter. And at the time, I didn't take it because I was kind of stupid. I was like, I'm in college. I need to do college-y things, so I shouldn't do that. And that whole thing fell through. If things had taken a different route, this might have been a huge success, and I might be a millionaire by now.
I honestly think many of us have stories very similar or sort of kind of like that. So
yeah, it's like I have at least 3 different points in my life where I'm like, I could have been a millionaire. It's like I feel stupid.
well,
But like I'm big and tall, so I could have been like a football player easily. Been in NFL probably. I had a friend that was, do you follow wrestling at all?
wrestling, not really. I'm vaguely familiar with it.
Okay, back in like 2003-ish, there was a guy with one missing leg.
I do not recall that.
Okay, then there was the guy who managed him. I knew him, and he was like, "You should go and do this." So I could have been going into the WWE at that point. And again, that Hasbro thing. Instead, I injured myself in art school and then got kicked out.
Okay, now I'm gonna go a little long here, so you guys that are out there viewing, just appreciate you guys being here. But I have to hear the story of how you got injured in art school. If you're willing to tell, I have to hear this.
Oh no, it was just stupidity. There was just the final. It was a chalk drawing, which I haven't looked at since, and it's probably destroyed by now. And I went down to leave, didn't realize I had left it, and so I turned as I was about to get on the bus, and I went back towards the room to grab it, and I fell on black ice right on my knee.
Oh my God.
And at the time, it didn't feel like anything, but it shifted my spine, the pelvis, and it messed up my vertebrae. And every time I go to the doctor says there's nothing wrong with my knee, but there's clearly something wrong with it. It's like it has felt puffy since then, and it's like semi-numb at times. So I'm like, dude, it's obvious there's something wrong. But I've lived with it for like 15 years now.
Right.
So
yeah, I actually had a very, very similar story. I used to work at a roller rink many years ago as a floor guard, and there was a bunch of little teeny bopper kids that were in there one time, and they decided they were gonna find out how many little 13-year-olds could jump on my back before I'd fall over. The answer is 5. And I went down on one knee and I hit hard on the concrete, and I've had a weather sensitive knee ever since then. So
yeah, at the time I was just like, yeah, whatever, I'm on the bus, let's go, and I was perfectly fine. And then as the years went on, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. So
that'll do it. Anyway, before you go, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to share the screen over to take a look at the page, so we can talk about your levels on that.
And by the way, this is like the 6th rendition of the campaign. I keep on changing it because if you give me advice, I take it and I'll alter it, and if I think it's like a better way to do it.
So we have the signed copies for $25 plus shipping. What are you charging for shipping? That's a hotly debated topic lately.
The shipping is $5 US, $15 international.
Okay, that's a good shipping price. $10 for the digital copy. For an unsigned physical copy, asking for $20. For the alternate cover 25.
I'm being a jackass with that autographing thing. I have to do the work, so.
Well, and that's think about what Zach went through and putting his signing all of his books. That's crazy. He spent a week writing Richard C. Meyer. And,
yeah, I still haven't even come up with the signature yet. At some point, I'm gonna have to just sit down for like a month straight, just figuring it out.
And like the funniest thing about that whole story to me, the absolute funniest thing is I watched number one Marmaduke fans unboxing, and his comment was that he didn't sign it, your boy Zach. Richard C. Meyer, and Marmaduke is like, you've betrayed us. So asking for 2 copies for $40.
Oh yeah, if you see that with the orcs sort of goblins in the foreground, that's a temporary cover.
Okay, that is not the final cover.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is important to note also. A final cover to be revealed later.
Yeah, that's funny because like I said, the alternate cover is there, but the actual cover is not, and that's just because he offered to do that for free, and he sort of said that on Twitter if it gets funded, and then he's like, "Oh shit, I didn't talk to you about that."
Hey, fan art's good though. I mean, that's one of those things where if somebody's willing to draw for you, they care about your project.
Yeah.
So that's something that's cool. So, and I love these parachuting little goblin things. That's hilarious to me.
And up top there's the trebuchet.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But whatever. I'll go with it.
Yeah. I wasn't going to be too picky about that, but I was like, there's not quite enough pulleys. Anyway. And a double combo pack, 4 comics for $85. That's actually not bad given the price on all that. So that goes from there. I can tell you what, I think there's some really neat. I love this look, this expression on this guy's face.
Doesn't that scene remind you of the TMNT?
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah,
it's like I saw that. I'm like, every time I look at that, I get the TMNT theme song playing in the back of my mind.
And so I'm assuming this here is from the first page, then.
That'll be the second page.
Second page, but that's the speech scene you're talking about.
Well, between the second and sixth page.
Right. Somewhere
depending on which version.
Right. So very cool stuff. And you've got J.S. Shiro coming on to do lettering if possible.
Yeah, if it's funded, it'll be lettered by J.S. Shiro.
Yeah, I've checked out his stuff a little bit. I love his YouTube content, but so I've not delved enough into his comic stuff, but his YouTube content is great stuff.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, because of my financial situation, I can't afford any of the books, and I kind of wouldn't ask. Like, Pope Fire before was offering to buy books for people, and I was like, no, I'm not going to ask that because, it would just end up getting destroyed by cats and dogs. So, like, I wouldn't ask that.
So, yeah, no, I understand that for sure, but I've gotten a few, not as many as I would have liked to have had, but I've gotten a few. So,
also, this is a good thing to note for not only my project but for other people's projects. If you look on the Indiegogo page, you can click back it and you can put any amount that you want in there. If you want to give more or if you want to give less, and you for some reason don't want a perk, like you can do that because some people just want to support, or they want to give more and they already got everything they want.
So yeah, I think, and as artists, and I think one of the things I think sometimes that we forget is that artists depend upon the patrons and upon the kindness and their devotion to the project, and that's why we talk about the customers need to be treated right. It's because that's the relationship we have with customers of art, is that they are in fact patrons, and patrons demand a certain level of respect. And if they're willing to go out of their way to support something that they believe in, if they believe in our project, certainly or whoever's project, certainly they're worthy of that level of respect.
Yeah,
so
this is a new thing that I've come to think in the last week or so, that I think the whole dream project thing is a little bit misguided with Comicsgate.
Mhm.
So it's nice that you have a dream project, but people want comics. They want to be entertained. They don't care about your dream project. Like, put out the book, and then when you get more famous or whatever, then you can do the dream project.
And I think one of the things you look at is does your comic, are you trying to sell something with a market? And that
You're cutting out. Okay, he's
oh yeah,
cut out.
sorry, am I entirely? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you cut out for like a good minute.
Wow, that's weird. Okay. Anyway, one of the things that I constantly am concerned with is the am I trying? I've been making comics since 2006, so on the web and in print, and I have not reached wild success with that, right? So one of the things I have always in considering is, am I producing a product that people like? Am I producing something that people want? And I don't know the answer to that question. I do know there are a few people that have probably about 40 people that regularly follow our webcomic, and they seem to like it okay, but they're also not turning out to buy my other comics. So I either suck at marketing, or I'm not quite producing something worthy of somebody else's money yet.
Yeah, I honestly have stopped believing what people say to me with regards to I like your project or I will back it, because I look at it, I'm like, I don't see you yet. Like, until you put down the money or until you give me a view or whatever I'm aiming for, I don't know what to say to that. I don't want to say thank you in that case. I mean, I'll say it because I'm grateful for at least that much from you, but I don't believe you in the sense that you believe that you are actually a backer or whatever.
And one of the things too is, if people have a legitimate complaint, or they're willing to go out and tell you what they think is wrong with your piece, at least they've looked at it enough to say, I don't like X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people that I actually prefer you tell me my book sucks or whatever my idea is because that allows me to improve.
Right.
And it's a better reaction than just nothing.
Yeah, it's a better reaction than nothing, or even than I really like it, and I'm going to go over here and not buy your comic.
Yeah. It's like, I really like you too, now that I never talk to you ever again. It's like, my actions completely follow what I just said.
Okay, well, I think we have said the whole piece, and not that I don't think there's more to talk about, because I definitely want to have you back on sometime, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm available whenever, even if this ends up not being funded. I'm still trying to push something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the creative life, right? We always strive to produce and to make something.
Yeah, I look at this entire experience as a learning experience. And it's a way to grow my audience.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a very valuable asset. Very not an asset, but an outlook that keeps from you from wallowing in depression, I suppose. But on that, thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate coming on and you're breaking up again.
Okay.
You completely broke up again. But yeah, like I said, I appreciate coming on and all that. Just give me a line and I'll come on. If there's nothing
I will do. So for those of you anyone stayed on watching, thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back here next week. So have fun, guys.